Okie doke. Start coming back here. And we'll see how well we do. So I'm going to do another screen share right there. We go. And what's the one? Okay. Let's see. So we're back onto the syllabus. I do have the green line on it. Excellent. Again, this is what you guys see when you guys log on. If you dive into modules, there is one module up right now, which is general info. This has the same syllabus that we just went through in PDF format. Also has intro to HORT 405 presentation, taxonomy for HORT 305, another presentation, and then finally, for now, a how to pronounce botanical names PDF. Those of you guys that took 306 last semester, you guys have already seen that, and we'll talk about that. But let's dive into plant ID. Hi, Annalise. Good to see you. Let's see. So we're going to dive into that. So I'll do a new screen share. And another screen share screen. And we're going to dive into this. This is plant ID, HORT 305, fall selections, lab supplies needed. We already went through this, but sharp pruners are good. If you're planning on being in the horticulture, landscape, nursery, etc. business, get yourself a good pair of pruners. Where's my start video? I don't know how long I've had these. These are Felcos. They're expensive. There's some great alternatives to Felcos. They're kind of the, I don't know, what you see all the fancy people using. They are great pruners. The blades are changeable, easy to sharpen. Obviously, I don't keep mine very clean, although I don't do much pruning of diseased material. Anyways, these are great. A good pair of Coronas, much less expensive, are also great as long as you keep them sharp. There's a lot of different pruners out there. One thing though is the bypass pruners are important, where there's one cutting blade and then there's one bypass blade. We'll talk about how to use these the best later, as opposed to an anvil, which is essentially a blade and then a hard surface that it crushes up against. And if they're sharp, they will cut, they do damage tissue. These things, yeah, all the stuff that was sort of in the syllabus, this is new, so we'll find out kind of what we need. If you guys find something helpful that you've used or are using, share it with us. Lab supplies, you are on your own. Are you guys, let's see. I don't know which one you're seeing. It doesn't really matter though. Are you guys seeing like the double presenter view or the single slide view?
Single slide.
Single slide, thanks you. Okay, so lab supplies recommended, you're on your own, right? These are, you guys are at the lab right now. We will be talking through pruning cuts. So when you take cuts of plant material, make sure that you're making a good cut. We'll go through really specifically how to do this and the reasons behind it. Typically, 45-degree angle is a really good cut. This one is more like a 30-degree angle. And it's a little bit too tight or too sharp of an angle. This is a little bit too slight of an angle. That'd be like a 30-degree angle. And then this one is just too high of a cut. And we'll look at, you know, essentially every time you're cutting a plant, you're injuring it. And the way that plants recover is they compartmentalize that injury. This one here would take a long time to compartmentalize. If it's an opposite arrangement of buds, then this is actually a really good cut. Try to get a slight angle onto it, but just above those buds is a great spot. Let's see. This here is showing an incorrect angle of the cut. It should go opposite of the bud itself. So this is the bud in this upper piece here. This is the bud. And essentially what is trying to be done here is that any water collection on this, because it's going to be a pretty rough surface, so water can collect on it. We want to encourage it to roll off. We do not want to encourage it to roll off towards the bud, though, because it can encourage disease. And so make sure that, as this depicts, any water that does fall in, it's going to roll off and not directly towards the bud. Let's see, this one again made too high, and we'll go through examples of that as we see by human intervention, meaning somebody going in there and making a cut that might not have been the best cut. And then also just what happens generally in nature. I mean, not every branch breaks off right where it's supposed to. So, but it's always interesting for me to look at. In terms of resources, Oregon State has a great resource for woody plants. They also have a mobile site. The part that's that has challenged me in the past about the Oregon State is that they don't have a whole lot of info on the ultimate size, the mature size of the plant material. And when I'm looking for plants, I'm really, you know, the first and foremost thing that I'm really looking for, besides sun exposure and all the other like important cultural characteristics that a plant prefers, is the ultimate size. For me, that is a really, really, really important piece. And it should be for you as well. So while this one has great information on plants themselves, the ultimate size of the plant is typically lacking. Cal Poly Select Tree, excellent resource. Really, really good resource for plant material. In fact, I'm going to new share, and we'll go right into that. And this. So, Cal Poly Select Tree. Okay, so that was the search. It's selecttree.calpoly.edu. And this is, they have done a really, really, really good job on this one. You can search for, it's primarily for trees. There's a lot of shrubs in this one as well. But the amount of information that they have in it, from a professional standpoint, this is my absolute go-to for a final check on plant materials. So one plant that I've really gotten to love recently is Styrax. Styrax japonicus. So I'm just going to search for Styrax. This is Japanese snowdrop tree. You can click into it. It has really good high resolution photos of leaves, overall plant itself, and any kind of fruit, nut, etc., as well as bark. Okay, so you can really get a good sense for what this tree is all about. Photograph-wise, what I use it for that, as well as the notes in here. So notes, general notes, needs ample water and good drainage. Pink chimes has pink flowers, lovely. The straight up Styrax japonicus has white flowers. They're fragrant, native to Japan, China, and Korea, from the family Styraceae. Styraceae. Thank you. We'll get into pronunciation later and how I feel about it. Tree characteristics: erect or spreading with low canopy, rounded or spreading shape. Deciduous tree. The height 20 to 30 by 15 to 25. So the height is greater than the width, which is, if you've had classes with me, I like those plants because of property sizes are smaller and smaller these days, and we're designing and working in these spaces. So these narrower plants that have great interest are kind of, they always end up in my plant lists. Growth rate, this is a really important one, 12 to 24 inches per year. Clients always ask about this. People, if you're working in a nursery, it's good to let people know that, there's a lot of plants that grow, especially trees that grow at this 12 to 24 inches per year. Which is not fast, not outrageously slow. But there's a lot that grow in the 2 to 4 foot per year as well, or 2 to 3 feet per year. So not a super fast grower, but good to be able to understand what it's going to take to get to maturity. Longevity, 40 to 150 years. Leaves, obovate, dark green, red, or orange deciduous. Okay, so it's going to tell us about the shape of the leaf. And a bunch of other good information on here, right? Litter is dry fruit. Other pieces of this: sunset zones 4 to 9 and 14 to 21, so works here. USDA hardiness zones 6 to 8. Exposure, full or partial shade, full sun or to partial shade. So pretty wide sun exposure. It likes moisture. It likes nice loamy soil. Highly acidic to slightly alkaline, so it's okay with a broad range of pH in the soil. Seaside tolerance is good in mild zones. So mild zones are the more temperate zones. So on the coast in Santa Cruz and south would probably be great, probably decently into Northern California. Might not be so great way up in the Northwest. All right, so that's what that means for us. These are really important things to look at as well, and things that are often forgotten to look at when selecting plant material. Branch strength rated as medium, so it's not a really, really strong tree, although it's relatively small and doesn't hold a ton of fruit weight. So usually not a huge issue, but good to know. Root damage potential rated as low. That means that they can be potentially planted relatively close to any hardscape or houses, although there's restrictions for how close you want to be to a house for fire escaping issues. And that typically is no mature canopy within 10 feet of the structure. Okay, so if we have a width at 15 to 25 feet, so let's say the width is 20 feet, that basically means that you would want to plant this tree no closer than 20 feet from a house, okay? because if you plant the tree at 20 feet from the house and this hand is the house and this hand is the tree, and that tree is going to grow to 20 feet wide, which means it's going to go 10 feet to one side. The mature canopy is going to end up at 10 feet from the house, okay? And clearly our air quality is awful right now, and it's because there's fires, right? And this is a constant for California. It's always been this way. Any Mediterranean climate has this kind of fire activity. It's just the nature of the beast. We love California because we love the weather. There's a lot of other reasons to love California. There's some reasons to not love California, but part of us living in this really nice climate is that we get fires regularly, and it's not going to stop. So honoring that fire-escaping principles is really good. We'll go through that more later in the semester. Health hazards, no known health hazards. So that means that it's probably okay to have around dogs and children that might eat this stuff. It attracts birds. That's lovely, right? If we encourage habitat, then we have much more resilient landscapes. Special uses and values, you can use it as a screen. It can also be hedged. I'm not a huge fan of that. You can pick a different plant to actually hedge or create a hedge that you do not have to hedge. Anyways, Cal Poly Select Tree, really excellent resource. Use it. And I'm switching back to this. And from current slides, so it should be in shape here. To be honest, I don't use it a whole lot, but it's there if you need it. UC Davis, California Floristics, a really good resource to jump into. This is from one of their plant sciences classes. Plant Master, this is one that I use a lot. And this is to help me generate my plant selections and to get me out of my bubble of normal plants that I use. We'll go through utilizing this as a tool. They also give a sweet deal to college students for using this while you are in school. There is a free version of it. You can just use it online, but you can't create lists with it. If you want to create and save lists, then you want the paid version, but I can't remember how much it costs for the professional version, but I think like the student version is very reasonable. So a lot of good stuff here. And one resource that I use because I can't keep everything in my head, and I find plants that I love all the time. And I don't know what the heck they are. Or maybe I do know what it is, but it's not coming to mind. Picture this. I don't know if you guys have used it, downloaded it, whatever it, but it is an app. The link to get the app is here. And it is it's a wonderful resource to be able to just walk up to a plant and say, geez, I don't know what this is. And you take a picture of it and it looks it up and it either nails it or sometimes it doesn't nail it, but it usually nails it. It'll give you a couple of options to be able to pick from. If it's not sure, it'll tell you like if you took a cruddy picture or not as well. It tells you really nicely, but it'll tell you, hey, try this. In fact, I'm working on the submittals for a design I'm doing for a Cal Fire station up in Chester, California, well, Westwood, which is up by Lake Almanor. And I had never been up there before I got this job. So I went up to visit the site, and you know, the building's almost complete, and on the outlying areas, so the adjacent properties, it's mostly forest land. I just kind of poked into these different areas to look at what's naturally growing there. And of course, there's some manzanita, some arctostaphylos. There was a couple plants that I didn't recognize though. And they were just flourishing. There's some great ground covers. One I still haven't been able to identify. It keeps telling me it's turkey tangle, but I know it's not turkey tangle. But two that I was really surprised by was one was a snowberry, so I think it's Symbocarpus, but it was a ground cover version. And it was just like doing amazing up there in the filtered light and just really amazing coverage. So I looked it up, and it was something that I always thought of that plant as a larger shrub that has these really cool white berries. But there's this great ground cover that I found of it, and ultimately I started looking on different nurseries. So beautiful, beautiful little ground cover, kind of a taller ground cover, not a real tight one. And then the other one was thorned ceanothus. It didn't look like a ceanothus at all to me. And those of you guys that know me, I'm a huge ceanothus fan. And so I got to just learn a new one and incorporate it into these, into this plan. So really, really helpful. It's a cheat, frankly. I mean, I know a lot of plants, but it's not like I walk up to every single thing and I just nail it. So I totally use this, and I'm not ashamed to use it in front of plants. There is a Facebook resource group, plant identification. This is actually a really helpful one. Yes, Laura, the app is free. I don't think that you can save them. I can't remember what the limitation to the free one is. But it does have you look them up, or you're allowed to use the free version, look at what it is, and then, you know, if you aren't able to save in the free version, then you can always just you can always take a screenshot of the answer. Okay, so there's ways around everything. Oh, Alana, you can only ID 5 a day with the free version. Thank you. So there's some more limitations. So if you're like a super plant nerd and you got to identify all the time, then pay the $20 for the year. Thanks, Megan. $20 for a yearly subscription, and yeah, that's probably what I did. And yeah, Tyler, I'll throw some pics of that one that I can't ID up. And yes, manzanita right against the building. I'm sure that Cal Fire would love me for that, but and if you guys can't see the chat right now, I'm just kind of going through chat stuff here. And Tyler writes, can you send me a pic of the plant you can't ID? Plant manzanita right against the building. They'll love you for that. You know, it's really funny about the way that they do these plans for these state projects is that they do all the building plans and the site plans and the grading plans and the drainage plans, and then they do one plan that is the landscape plan. And then the goal is to basically find a design build company that can come in and design it fully, get everything approved through CAL FIRE, and then they build it to those specs. But in the original one, they had all their trees, they basically weren't conforming to, WELO, and they weren't conforming to like really normal firescaping techniques. They had plants that got trees up against the buildings. There was all sorts of really lame stuff. And they didn't have the distance between trees addressed. So anyways, but I'm guessing that if they see manzanita adjacent to the building, yes, they won't like me. Very not fans, but because I don't want them to use bark mulch. Anyways, this Facebook group is a great group to be able to utilize. You basically post, if you see a plant that you can't identify, you can post it to this, and then within minutes, people that are part of the group will identify it for you. So, you know, it's like picture this, but you're interacting with humans. The herbarium, talk a little bit about this now, and then we'll go into greater detail later on it. Because you guys won't really have to like dive into it for a while. So an herbarium is a collection of dried plants, classified, labeled, and mounted for use in for botany study. Why create it? Original reason was to develop a book about medicinal plants. Now it's just to create a center for research and public information, or your own coffee table books, or your own collection. And also to preserve species of historical importance, and to assemble data regarding ecological distribution. To make the normal one, you're actually pressing plants, which is, those of you artsy people out there, is actually really wonderful when it's done really well. So creating an actual press, we'll go through this in the handouts more, but really you're looking at some cardboard, some paper, and some way to press. This one is very nice. I don't imagine that all of you guys have one of these or are willing to buy one or make one, but there's other ways to do it as well. Simple books and weights, etc., trying to get them as flat as possible and trying to get them to dry and retain as much of the color as possible and not mold. Okay, those are other pieces of it. But we will be building one. I would encourage you guys to do them however you see most comfortable and however you see would be like the most effective for you in the future. Anna, question?
Hi, yeah, I have a question. I remember for the herbarium last semester, you gave us cards to fill out the information on the plant. Will you be emailing it to us in the beginning of the semester so we could start slowly filling it out so we don't do it last minute?
Yes, that was fun. I think we have a couple different echoes there, but I'm pretty sure full question was, we're looking for the actual cards. And if you guys need hard copies of the cards, let me know and we'll set up a time for you guys to pick those up because we have an outrageous amount of them already on the already printed in boxes at the HORT area. We do need to coordinate times for those pickups. So we can do that, as well as I do have the digital fillable version that I'll upload into the module for the herbarium. So you can do it either way. You can hand do it with the hard copies that are, I'm pretty sure they're printed on a pretty heavy paper, so it makes it relatively nice. You can also utilize the PDF that is fillable, so you can get that info out there or on there relatively easily.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So we'll go into that more when we introduce that. The rest of this goes through sort of stuff that's a little bit also 300. You probably haven't dove into this stuff. You haven't reached this information yet. Looking at this map, there's two ways to look at climate zones in general. There's probably a lot more, but the two most recognized ways are the USDA plant hardiness zones, There are 13 hardiness zones. It's based on the average minimum temperature. And sometimes it's used at nurseries. In fact, it's used quite a bit. And you can see here that northeastern California, we get down into that zone 1. Let's see, we've got zone 5, 5B, 5A, 6A. We also, in lovely California, we get down into zone 10, right? So if we're looking at average minimum temperature, really like San Diego into LA, they'll hit 30, 35 occasionally. And if we look into the Santa Barbara area, gets a little bit colder, but typically just recognizing the low temperatures. And that's a good way to look at it from a will your plant survive standpoint. But it's not necessarily, like from a horticultural standpoint, not necessarily the best way to look at it, because there's so many other things that go into cultural conditions that a plant prefers. And when I'm talking about cultural conditions, I'm talking about not like culture, like we are in a Zoom culture now, or we're in COVID culture, or whatever's happening, right? We're talking about the environmental characteristics of an area, or a microclimate or a macroclimate, that make a plant more or less happy where it's at. So using the USDA plant hardiness zones, while it is a good indicator of will your plant survive the winter, there are some issues with it, because there are areas in Washington State that are the same USDA plant hardiness zone as areas in Texas. And I think that we all kind of know, maybe a couple of plants would do fine in both areas, but they're very different areas from a moisture level standpoint, amount of rain standpoint, summer hot standpoint, et cetera. So there's a lot more that goes into it. Sunset climate zones, on the other hand, are quite a bit more in depth in looking at the various zones. So right off the bat, there's 24 climate zones in the sunset system. They look at high and low temperatures. They look at daylight hours, whether there's marine influence. They look at elevation, humidity, rainfall, and it is considered more accurate because of all these factors that are taken into account. So if we look at really the Sacramento area, really that's sitting in zone 14. Other zone 14s in California, we get some stretched up sort of the Napa, Sonoma Valley up through here. We get some down in the valleys behind Santa Barbara. Other zone 14 is like the Morgan Hill, Gilroy area. Okay, so, and then this here is Salinas Valley. That's another zone 14. Now, right next to our zone 14 is zone 9. And then just up from that is zone 7. Now, that zone 9 is up a little bit in elevation, okay? And so this zone 14, if we look at the characteristics of zone 14, and there's a lot of great stuff that grows in zone 14, these are valleys essentially that have marine influence. So you know, that Delta breeze. I'm in West Sac, so we're, you know, in terms of the Sacramento area, we're one of the first areas that gets that really good Delta breeze, which is lovely in the summertime. And we get the fog, right? So this is coastal influence. This is marine influence that you get that from. This Morgan Hill and Gilroy, and what else is down in there? I can't remember. Patterson, no. Anyways, that is the valleys that are getting coastal influence from the San Francisco Bay on the south side of it. The Napa and Sonoma valleys, those are getting the coastal influence from the North Bay. And then if we look at this zone 14, it's not labeled, but same color. That one's getting the coastal influence from the Salinas Valley, right? So we've got Santa Cruz and Monterey and Salinas, and that's really kind of a low, like lower elevation valley that really wraps kind of deep into the south. And so it's a valley, it gets hot. We know how it gets hot here, but it does get that marine influence. It does get that breeze. Same thing for Santa Barbara. The mountain ranges behind Santa Barbara, there's the San Ynez Valley that wraps in from Lompoc or Vandenberg Air Force Base, kind of that area north of, there's Point Conception and then Point Arguello here, and you get this really nice marine influence in there. It gets hot, right? We know how it gets hot here. It gets hot in all these areas, but it still does have marine influence. Now, it's really close to these zone nines. And so we're talking about a little bump in elevation. So Roseville is probably right at that. Somebody in chat would probably correct me or let me know if I'm right. And so there's just a lot of factors that influence how well plants will do in these different zones. So I tend to utilize the sunset climate zone more. Well, I'll be honest, I only use the sunset climate zone. I'll sort of look at, like for my project in Westwood, which is like somewhere up in here, I'll look at the USDA climate zone for it just to make sure that I'm not going to kill anything up there because I'm not familiar with the area as much. But I really do use the sunset climate zone primarily. Okay, so when we're talking about zones, we're primarily going to be talking about sunset climate zones. We may chat about the USDA and like the minimum temperatures that plants can deal with. Sometimes you'd be surprised. So that's it for kind of the overall intro. And let's see, what do I have up next here? Any questions on that? If you're on mute, you can either unclick mute and ask a question. I'll pop chat up. Again, I probably missed something here. What's this? Anybody know any? Thank you. I'm just popping through this. So Alana, by the way, there's also a subreddit called "What is this plant?" for plant IDs. r/. Thank you. I just I just learned about Reddit because I don't know if everybody saw that I last semester I moved the whole spring plant sale to my house, and I finished growing out the seedlings in my backyard after cutting down trees to give it full sun. I was going to cut the trees down anyways because we're doing a big landscape project, and the trees. Don't get all upset. I'm as much of a hugger as you probably are, but the trees were awful selections, and we'll go through awful selections. There's a lot of them, but they needed to go. I brought all the plants.
Were they mulberries?
No, they weren't mulberries. There was a close to dying apricot. There was two Pyrus Kawakami eyes, or no, 2 pyrus, no, they were calcomias or calorinas. They're calorinas. Awful, well, no, not awful trees. There's a great spot for every tree. They were awful trees for my backyard. They drop limbs really easily and quickly, not safe for children. And then the last one, which is one that I paid somebody to remove, was a, I'll pop it up here. This one's fun. Which I totally loved. I wish I didn't have to take it out, but it was a, it was a Salix Matsudana. Let me new share, and we will share that. Images of this Salix Matsudana. Cool, right?
Yeah.
This thing, it was absolutely beautiful. And you know, those, you know, floral, these things are used widely in the floral industry. However, let's like
an overgrown area.
Oh, we're still on here. This is great. So I'm going to do a search by name, and we've got Salix Matsudana. Search. There she is.
Really?
That's the right one.
No.
They gotta have more on there.
Corkscrew.
Alba.
Twisted. Tortusa.
Let's try this one. That looks close to it. Way too small. This thing was, it was definitely 40, 50 feet. And I have a small backyard. It's 25 feet deep by 60 wide or so. And the thing, Salix is shed constantly. They shed hard when fall comes. They drop limbs quickly. And the thing was just gargantuous. It took 5 professionals an entire day to remove it, although they removed a bunch of other plants for my neighbors at the same time. Anyways, so that came out, very messy tree, bad selection for a patio. So I pulled that out, pulled everything out, gave myself full sun, grew out the plants, back to what I was talking about, grew out the plants, and then went on to Square and set up online store. And maybe I'll tell you how happy my wife was with like the approach and jumping the gun on this one was, but the online store went great. I figured out how to set it up. It took a fair amount of time, but I made it so that people could go in and pick which ones they wanted, see what they were going to be, etc. And I was so excited about it that I just went live with it, and I didn't adjust the pickup times, like when people could pick up. And I don't know why I did that. In retrospect, it was a really bad idea. But I was up at a meeting in Penryn, and my wife kept texting me and then calling me, and she knows like when I'm in a meeting, I'll just say, give like the auto text that says, sorry, I can't talk right now. But she started calling me, and she's like, there are people at our house that are supposed to be picking up plants. I was like, oh man, you gotta be kidding me. And so I jumped in my truck and started racing home. And I'm still getting calls. There's more people at our house. And I was like, oh Jesus. I was like, just have the kids like pull them. And so they started pulling them and trying to bring them out. And on the way back, my truck overheated. So I had to stop like every 3 minutes and let my truck cool down. It was like a total mess. And I was in the total doghouse. I had to like, some people had to come back, but ultimately we figured it out and did like, all of a sudden, like people, like we were getting like 100 orders a day. And so my poor kids were like out there. It was like this was a good test for the family and like resiliency and not like divorcing their father. But we ended up doing a bunch, and then people would show up. I'm like, where do you see this? And I think I posted on, my big mistake was that I posted it on ARC exchange, which means that everybody from ARC that's faculty, staff, etc., they'll see it. And I was like, this will be fine. I won't post it anywhere else for now. But then like they shared it, and then somebody shared it on Reddit, and that's how I learned what Reddit is. And that's the full circle. So Alana, thank you for the Reddit piece. Now I'm 43, but I know what Reddit is. And now I know it has another resource. And I do know that it can make a plant sale go well. I think we ended up making like $5,000 on the plant sale over a lot of weeks. But none of the plants went to waste. We ended up like putting the rest out for people to pick up for free, et cetera. But it was really great. It was a huge pain in the butt. And it was a little stressful for the family, but we managed to pull it off. So
I wish I had seen that, because I was looking forward to the plant sale, but then once we stopped for COVID, I never actually heard anything about it.
Oh man, maybe I shouldn't have mentioned anything. I thought that I shared it with some students, although most of the students like found it on Reddit or some other means. I don't know how everybody else found it. I probably won't do that again, but it was great. And there's a lot of, our eggplant right now are going crazy. So yeah.
And if anyone's in pest management this semester, there's also one called "What Is This Bug?"
Nice.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Good.
And thank you for the story, Taylor.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I've got plenty more of those.
Quick question. Can you drop the 3 plants you talked about, the one you couldn't ID and the other 2 you saw near the fire or whatever?
Yeah, let me see if let me see if I can pull it up. I'll search for the one I couldn't ID next time we take a break, which should be shortly here. Okay. And then to answer Laura's question, does anybody have a good secret to keeping the herbarium samples from molding?
I'm going to say if you're drying, should be a moistureless, dry area. Keeping it damp, cold, like in a closet or something is going to be a no-go. But if you're drying anything, you want dry, humidless heat.
Attic would be a great spot, right?
Yeah, actually attic would be perfect. Good ventilation.
Yeah.
Maybe forget about it, never do it.
Totally. Yeah. So Laura, if you want to venture into your attic, that's probably a great spot. Otherwise, somewhere just really dry. And this is a good time of year for it now to be able to take those and actually dry them, because we're on pretty low humidity. Once we start getting into like later October into November, we know that that's going to back off. We're going to have a lot more humid. Oh, Adrian, good to see you. Microwave the cuttings. I have no idea if that's right, but you know what? I'll have my kids try it and see.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah, that tends to dry things out pretty quickly. Okay. Let's see. Let's do same thing. Let's do a 10-minute break, jump back in, a 9-minute break, sorry. We'll jump back in at 10:35, and I'll see you in a couple. Start shown by
I just hella don't want to spend any money. Thank you.
I don't either, but I need to go do it.
Okay, 10:37, man. Okay, so we're gonna, excuse me, back into this. And where am I here? I wanna be right there. And student view. And so back into Canvas. What we've just gone through, we've already gone through syllabus. We've gone through this intro to HORT 305. I'm going to graze through this taxonomy piece because my hope was to not keep you guys around until 11:35. But if it happens, it happens. I am going to have this how to pronounce botanical names. as just a reading assignment that you guys should get some pleasure out of. And then before we finish today, I'm going to go through these plant characteristics diagrams that, excuse me, I just published on this module. So, and obviously all of this stuff is here for you to be able to go through at your leisure, remind yourself of things, put yourself to sleep, whatever you want to do. So new share here is, that's not where I want to be. I want to be there. And slideshow. So if you guys had HORT 306 with me, same thing. But just to review, I won't go through the YouTube on this. So ultimately, and this is a big part of this, what is taxonomy? A branch of science that encompasses the description, ID, nomenclature, and classification of organisms. Nomenclature means name, classification means breaks down into evolutionary groups. So kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. We're typically, in this class, we're dealing with genus, species primarily and looking at family because looking back into the plant families is always interesting and can really give you a great insight as to how to ID plants, or at least ID them to the family if you don't know them. Obviously, you can use picture this as well, or the Reddit plant thing. So kingdoms, obviously we have Animalia, Plantae, Protista, fungi, and then these ones too. In terms of the plant kingdom, from kingdom to phylum, we've got plants that make seeds, and then plants that don't make seeds. So these are plants that are ferns, mosses, algae. They reproduce in a different way, some of them through spores, a lot of different ways. We won't look at a ton of these, but we will probably look at some ferns. And then we have plants that we look at that do make seeds, and some that don't have flowers. Those are gymnosperms, primarily the conifers. And then those that do make flowers, and these are the ones that we typically think of, the angiosperms, sunflowers and angiosperms. Classes within that, right? So we got to, from kingdom to phylum, okay? So we've got angiosperms and gymnosperms. And then we've got some classes within that. We've got monocots and dicots, okay? If you guys, especially if you took my HORT 300 class, I'm a huge fan of looking at plants from a class standpoint, just looking at monocots versus dicots. And it gives you a lot of information in terms of how a plant will perform, what a plant may look like. And for me, it's how are these plants going to interact with the soil? Primarily in terms of a fibrous root system like the monocots have, or grasses, right? Grasses, monocots being corn, Calamagrostis, or the feather reed grasses, the miscanthuses, or the maidenhair grasses. Bamboo is a monocot. Palm trees are monocots. Many succulents are monocots. And they tend to have a very fibrous root structure. Typically, unless it's like a vetiver grass, it's relatively shallow. Depending on its size, you're looking at typically those things within the top 18 inches of soil. Dicots, on the other hand, these are the plants that we're used to seeing. Flowering plants usually have a taproot. They have a broad leaf, and they have netted venation typically, whereas the monocots have parallel venation. This should be review for a lot of you. If you haven't seen this before, then welcome classes of plants, monocots, and dicots. Families, so families of plants, so this is the next one down, the Rosaceae family. This is a broad family that obviously we see Rosaceae, we're gonna think rose, also apple, and many other things. So if we look at taxonomic hierarchy, I skipped a video, but you guys can go back to it. If we look at taxonomic hierarchy, we've got kingdom, so this is all over 280,000 species. We break into angiosperms. Of the 280,000 species, over 250,000 species are angiosperms. If we go into classes of plants, of the angiosperms, the dicots have many more species to them, 235,000. If we look at orders, the Rosaceae family, or the Rosales order has 18,000 species. Of the Rosaceae family, there's 35,000 species within that. And within the Rosa genus, there's over 500 species. And then if we look at a specific species, we've got Rosa gallica or moss rose. Okay, so this is the hierarchy. So we break down in terms of the actual species of this one, the moss rose, Rosa gallica. There is one of those. There's only one. There may be some other, there may be some varieties of that within that may have a different flower characteristic, but there's really only one species that's within that. Okay, so broad group, kingdom, all the way down into a specific species, Rosa gallica. So within the Rosaceae family, we find all sorts of things. Our stone fruits, our pears, our apples, berries, cherries, strawberries, plums, roses, right? There are a lot of plants that fall under the Rosaceae family. And if I toggle back real quick, 3,500 species, specific species that are within the Rosaceae family, okay? Very large, and I don't know if you would ever have recognized that a strawberry is within the rose family, but closely related. So Carl Linnaeus came up with this rules for binomial nomenclature. And the real reason behind it, as you'll see if you watch, here's the video, if you watch this video, and this is about a scientist, she teaches at a community college, and she was doing some field work in, I can't remember where, Sweden or Finland or something, and they were using common names, and she was working with an international group, and so the Swedes or the Finns or whoever it was, you'll see they were calling a certain bird a buzzard, and she thinks of buzzard as turkey vulture, like we see a ton of here, especially right now, I swear. Like when I'm out on the levees, there's like 8 million of them. Anyways, so that's what she thinks of a buzzard as, but they were talking about a completely different bird. Okay, so we don't tend to use common names in the horticultural industry because you can be talking about, you know, a very different plant, and this can happen regionally, you know, just from county to county, state to state. There's different common names. They're good to use. I think that it's really good to know what the common name of a plant is. because when you're working with clients or helping people in a nursery, sometimes you sound super freaking snooty if you're like Morzoba, right? Like, you know, they don't know what you're talking about. And I always preface things like, I'll let my clients know, hey, I'm going to say the scientific name. It doesn't mean I'm any smarter than you. In fact, I'm probably not, but I use it because that's the trade names. Don't like take offense to it, because some people, as soon as they hear a funky name like that, they're going to say, oh, well, you know, he's just trying to act smart again. We know he's not. The name consists of two words, genus and specific epithet. Both words are italicized or underlined. Typically, if you're typing these names, they're going to be italicized. If you're handwriting these, you can underline them. It's like the title of a book. Genus is always capitalized. So the first letter of the genus is always capitalized. The specific epithet is lowercase, all lowercase. Both names are Latinized or made to sound fancy, as you'll see from the reading on how to pronounce names. Let's see, two different organisms cannot have the same name, unlike common names. Obviously, buzzard, different countries, it means something different. And then two species can have the same specific epithet if the genus is different, okay? So, and keep in mind that names sometimes change. And this is happening a lot right now. And it was frustrating for me at first, but now it's sort of fun. And this is basically because of all the DNA stuff that's coming up right now, and they're able to really figure out what something is and what family it's in or what its true genus is. So this is an example, two species. This is obviously an owl, and this is a mulberry, right? This one is Morus alba. This one is Tito alba. So they both have the same specific epithet, but a different genus name. And obviously they're very different things. The alba typically refers to something white, okay? So the genus and specific epithet making up the species name can usually tell us something about the plant or the species. So genus defines the group, like your last name. Specific epithet defines the individual plant, like your first name. Genus plus specific epithet is the species. An example is Pyrus caloriana. A variety of Pyrus caloriana, and we'll go through a couple of these, is distinctive characteristics in a certain geographical area of a species, written as VAR, or variety, and name, or VAR name. Okay, so underlined. You don't underline or italicize the VAR, or variety, short for variety. A cultivar is a cultivated variety. Okay, so typically a variety, if grown from seed, typically you'll find that it will have, chances are it will have similar or same characteristics as the parent plant, because this is an environmental condition that has forced it to grow that way, or it's responded to evolution. A cultivar is the cultivated variety. So humans are typically the ones doing this. It's a particular plant that has mutated naturally or through deliberate hybridization and is reproduced by humans to keep its phenotypical traits, written as CV name, capitalized, or name in italics without the CV. So not cultivated variety. Cultivated variety is CV. If it's crossed, either an X can be between the genus and specific epithet, or if a cultivar name was given simply genus and the cultivar. That's confusing. This will be much more clear as we go through this in greater detail and we go through the lists, okay? Just me telling you all this stuff, like if I'd never seen this before, I would think, what are you talking about? This is really, once we get into these lists, it will become more and more familiar. So more on nomenclature. So varieties, cultivars, and then can a plant have both a variety and a cultivar? Yes. A variety is something that will typically breed true to type. This means that seedlings grown from a variety will also have the same unique characteristics of the parent plant. For example, there is a white flowering redbud that was found in nature. Its scientific name is Cercis canadensis, variety alba. The varietal term is alba, which means white, referring to the white flowering of this red bud, right? It's a red bud tree. It is a Cercis canadensis, variety alba. So this means that it's going to flower white despite its common name. I guess it'd be a white red bud. Whatever. If you were to germinate this from seed, most, if not all, would also be white flower. Okay? So it will typically breed true to type if you find a seedling of it or if you germinate the seeds and grow them. Cultivars are not necessarily true to type. So essentially, this is like something that was found that's a total oddball, right? Typically, we find this with some sort of very odd or abnormal form of the plant or a very abnormal genetic variation that happened. This happens in apples, right? There are very few true varieties of apples. The genes of an apple, every single seed is going to be from an apple that came from a parent tree that was very sweet and very crisp. And maybe its flowers were pink. If you germinate a seed off of one of those apples, it could flower white, have a completely different growth form, and its apple flavor might be crazy bitter, small, and super mushy, right? Its genetic variation is so different that very few varieties occur, but cultivars do, right? So I typically go to Fuji apples and Pink Lady apples. They're sweet, they're crisp. The Pink Ladies are a little tart. These are the apples that I really like. And these are cultivars. These are something that if you bred them, if you germinated those, it wouldn't occur again. You'd get something very different. But if you took a cutting of this plant, then you could reproduce it. So cultivar is just that. And typically these are the ones that we see with plant patents. People make money off of the royalties on these things. Can a plant have both a variety and a cultivar? Yes. A good example is sunburst honey locust. Its scientific name is Gladitia triacanthos, variety Inermos, sunburst. Okay, so Inermos means without thorns, and sunburst refers to the bright golden spring leaf color. Okay, so really the Gladitia triacanthos variety Inermis is without thorns, but it doesn't have this cool aspect of the sunburst, which has golden spring leaf color. Okay, now somebody was growing this Gladitia, and one of its seedlings had this very interesting characteristic to it that had golden spring leaf color. Well, they took that. They probably first tried to germinate the seeds and see if they could get the same thing. It didn't happen. They still had that plant. They took a cutting of it and they reproduced it asexually through cuttings or however they did it. And they actually got it to do the same thing. So this one is a both variety with a cultivar, okay? So back to Pyrus caloriana. We've got a straight species, which is the Pyrus caloriana. A variety of that is Garryoides or Lauraoides or something-oides, typically named after either a characteristic of that plant or named for the person that discovered it and decided to make it their own. A cultivated variety could be Pyrus caloriana Tristan. Again, this one is typically not Latinized, but this is a cultivated variety that somebody named Tristan discovered, and they propagated it and they named it that. Could also be written as Pyrus caloriana CV cultivated variety Elizabeth. Okay, so hybrid species would be Pyrus fremontia. So this would be the Pyrus caroliana mixed with, that was bred with something else. This can happen through human intervention. This can also happen in nature. Tracking it when it's human intervention, it's relatively easy to figure out what the hybrid, the cross is. When these are found in nature, and this does happen a lot in nature, it's much more challenging for them to figure out what the cross is. If there's a hybrid species cultivar, there's Pyrus fremontia, okay, same thing. Bobby or Pyrus Bobby, okay, so it's Pyrus x fremontia Bobby. It can also be written simply as Pyrus Bobby, okay? This is a perfectly acceptable way to write it. I'll go through some other examples of that. And then there's varietal cultivar, Pyrus caloriana, variety Raquelioides supreme. Okay, so obviously Raquel found this particular varietal that was a genetic variation that had some sort of interesting characteristic to it. And then somebody found that Pyrus caroliana Raquelioides that had some sort of interesting characteristic to it. They couldn't breed it or reproduce it through seed. They took a cutting of that and it carried that same characteristic. So now we have a varietal cultivar, okay? Again, if this is your first time introduced to this stuff and you're feeling overwhelmed, don't sweat it. We go through plant lists, we talk about this stuff. You guys will understand this at some point, or at a bare minimum, you will be able to identify the plant because we talked through this and you know how to write down what you need to write down. So here we have more on plant naming. Scientific name Ceanothus arborea. This is the island Ceanothus or island lilac. Arborea typically means tree-like, okay? This is the Ceanothus portion is an ancient Greek word or derived from an ancient Greek word that means spiny plant. A lot of these Ceanothus do have sort of spines to them. It's not like thorns, although there are some that are a little bit thorny. And so it's a characteristic of the plant that was, you know, utilized a Greek name that means spiny plant. And arborea is tree-like. So this one, Island Ceanothus, its origin is the Channel Islands. I grew up in Santa Barbara. I visited the Channel Islands a lot. Where I grew up in Santa Barbara was like back in the hills, about 2/3 of the way up, overlooking Goleta. Beautiful place to grow up. There's a ton of these. They are gorgeous plants. They are big. This is a big plant. It has a beautiful green trunk to it, but it is very tree-like. Most people would look at this and say that it is a small tree. You know, you can find out something from the name itself. To be honest, I know a couple of these. I am not that well versed in the Greek portion or the Latin portion of these, but I do find it interesting. And if you can nerd out on that kind of stuff, then you can learn a lot about a plant by looking kind of at the roots of its name. There is, I'm in West Sac again, and there is a house maybe 4 blocks from here that has 2 of these growing that are gorgeous, just beautiful. So, and if you guys zip back to that Sunset Western, the Sunset climate zones, and you look at those Channel Islands, the Channel Islands, the California Channel Islands or Santa Barbara Channel Islands, they have a very similar growth zone or plant zone to a lot of Sacramento, that 14 zone, and a lot of San Francisco. So the more, so like Anacapa Island is a little teeny island, so it's very coastal. Santa Cruz Island is quite large. In fact, it can influence weather patterns. It's so big, and it has a beautiful Central Valley to it that that has really, really similar characteristics to our Zone 14 that we're familiar with, or the Salinas River Valley, or obviously the back mountain ranges to the Santa Barbara, San Ynez Valley, etc. So a lot of those plants that are native from there do super well here, like incredibly well here, unless they need heavy coastal influence. Then you kind of have to treat them a little bit differently. Anyways, one of my very favorite plants, rare to find a site that you can grow this on, unless you're working on a very large project. Here's our Pyrus caloriana. This is that straight species that we talked about here, right? Pyrus caloriana. This is the Pyrus caloriana. These are used a lot. They do have beautiful fall color, just phenomenal fall color. And excuse me. This is the straight species, again, used a lot and often used horribly. This is in the central planter at my kids' school. These were planted all over my kids' school. One characteristic that you can see here is that its branching pattern is very horizontal, and its wood strength is very low, which means that there's certain times of the year, if it's very hot, the branches, and there's a little bit of wind, they'll snap right off. Not good for an elementary school, or any school for that matter, right? It can happen fast, and they're big enough branches that they can kill people, right? This is a serious thing. So whatever ding dong decided to put this at my kid's school, there's literally 3 of them left out of the maybe 40 that were planted. And they keep taking them out and not replacing them, which is really frustrating. It was a bad call to begin with. Just because there's a plant in a spot that's beautiful and mature doesn't mean that originally it was the right selection, okay? So obviously for the intent, beauty, fall color, very beautiful structure when they've lost their leaves, but they snap easily and can kill children, not a good selection. Now, this is the straight species. This here is a cultivated variety, okay, that is Chanticleer. This is one of my favorites to use. Like I talked about earlier, narrow upright. This is the Chanticleer. They typically only get to about 15, 20 feet wide, but about 30, 40 feet tall. So this is great for narrow spaces. It does have excellent fall color and a wonderful spring white flower show. One thing that can deter people from this plant is that some people think that the beautiful white flower show smells like urine. If you think it smells like urine, don't plant it. If it's near something, or if people are scent sensitive, don't plant it near the patio where they might get offended in the springtime. Frankly, I don't think it smells like urine. I think it is a relatively pleasant smell, but for its use, it is a great cultivated variety, Chanticleer, or in quotes, Iris caloriana chanticleer. This one here, Calamagrostis X acutiflora Carl Forrester. Those of you guys that know me know this is one of my favorite plants to use. Great for tight spaces, great, very tall, when in bloom. In fact, I have some of these in front of my house that I have literally not watered all summer long, and they look just like this, and the flowers are to 6 feet tall. Okay, so great plant. The common name on this one is Carl Forrester feather reedgrass. X tells us that it is a hybrid. It's a cross between Calamagrostis epigajos or gajos with Calamagrostis arundinaceae. Okay, so that's the X in there. Here's the picture of these. You'll see this all over the web. Great for creating walls, great movement, etc. Okay, that takes us through taxonomy. If you don't get it, review this. It's on. It is on Canvas. You can go back through that. This is recorded. You can go back through it and listen to me. So the resource is there. Given that we are all the way to 11:10, I just want to wrap this up. I do want to go through the last couple of things here in Canvas for you. One thing I want to mention really quick, it's only the first meeting, and I'm going to change something here just to clarify it though. This year, plant characteristics tests. This is also going to include a couple really random, really simple quizzes that I'll just throw up. They're open book, open note, open Google, open Canvas. And my intent on that, so it's not just these tests that I'll give, but my intent on that is so that on these pieces that I don't get to, I'm going to put up this one. This is how to pronounce botanical names. So this is an article about the correct way to pronounce Latin names, when it's appropriate, in what presence of people you should pronounce them correctly if you care. And I care. I think it's important. I'm not saying that you need to care. I'm not saying that you shouldn't care. This is up to you. I do appreciate being able to pronounce them correctly. However, I screw up all the time, and I'm not going to knock you for that. And some people pronounce things a little bit differently. Don't knock them for it. The PhD botanists out there, they pronounce things perfectly, and they're all about it. So honor the fact that they've gone and gotten a PhD and they can pronounce these things perfectly. A lot of times, though, I pronounce things so that I can remember how to spell them. And that's carried over from when I took these classes in the early 2000s. If I could remember how to spell, I won't go into them, but certain plants, dietes, penicidum, several of them, I will pronounce them verbally aloud or in my head so that I remember how to spell them. Do it however you want. Just understand that there's some people out there, and if one of you guys goes on to be a PhD as a botanist, feel free to come visit me, whether we're Zooming at that point or in class, live, in person. Feel free to come back and talk about what an idiot I am for allowing you guys to do this, and good for you for becoming a PhD. Anyways, again, read it. The reason I mentioned the syllabus thing is that I'll probably just do a quick quiz out of this that you'd have to actually look at this. And I just want to make sure you look at it. It's not going to be anything hard, but read through this between now and the next time we meet, ideally by the end of this week, okay? It's short, very short, easy, and it's actually quite humorous. The next piece to this, which should be helpful for you, is plant characteristic diagrams. Now in HORT 300, the intro class, I go into this very lightly, and I really think that you should be allowed to have, you know, these things when you're identifying. These are just characteristics of monocots and dicots, okay? It also goes down into plant leaf part names, okay? Very important piece here. Leaf arrangements, opposite, plural, alternate, and sub-opposite. Let's see, leaf parts, again, conifer, leaf type names, simple or sessile leaves, compound leaves, okay, the difference between them. This just helps us talk about these plants, helps us identify them by their characteristics, and this is how we do it. Leaf shapes. These are diagrams of those leaf shapes. These are descriptions of the leaf shapes. Leaf margins, diagrams of the margins with their names. And descriptions of the leaf margins with their names. Leaf tips, diagrams, descriptions, leaf bases, diagrams, descriptions, leaf surfaces, right? This would require to look at them very closely. I think I figured out some good webcam stuff so that we could potentially look at this stuff. I don't know if we're going to be able to like dive in this deep, but this helps you to be able to identify plant material. So conifer leaves, okay, how to identify the different types of conifer leaves. Venation, okay, pinnate venation, palmate venation. Dichotomous venation. This shows you how much I care about these pronunciations, but I do appreciate it. This one, if you're looking at this, you're probably looking at it saying, ooh, ginkgo, right? Yes, ginkgo is one of these that has this type of leaf pattern. Very interesting plant. In fact, if we go back through the taxonomy, the ginkgo lands into one of its own little slots there. Parallel venation. This is typical of monocots. Grass plant identification. Now this one, if you go into the landscape industry or the nursery industry, retail nursery, not so much, but the wholesale nursery, a lot. Very important to be able to identify your grasses. And during the dormant season, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a bunch of pots of plants that have cut off shoots. So you're really relying on these characteristics to be able to identify what that plant is. And this is really important. One time I had 50 Panicum virgatum heavy metals coming out to a job site, and this was in February. They come out, they're all cut back, but I looked at them, and I'm not like the most amazing plant idea, but I know these two. They came out and they were all Calamagrostis Carl Foresters. And I knew the two plants really well. If I didn't know those plants so well, and it being February, I would have planted all of those. And in June, it was going to be pretty noticeable that that was the wrong plant. So luckily I was well versed in both those plants well enough to be able to call the nursery and say, hey, you guys sent out the wrong plants. Please bring me these, right? That could be a very expensive problem. The nurseries are typically happy to bring you the right plants out. In fact, good nurseries, they'll be out there that day or first thing the next morning to swap them out. But if they're already planted, the nurseries don't really like to take them back. And if the client realizes that you put something in that was incorrect and didn't catch it, then ultimately as the contractor, if that's you, that's your problem, right? And that is out of 51-gallon plants, that's about $1,800 mistake, okay? Not including the removal. So knowing these is really important. And these are the pieces to it that the identifiable characteristics besides just the flower of a grass. Okay, so we'll go into that when we're looking at different characteristics of grasses. Palm leaf characteristics, okay, what the characteristics of the palm leaf are that helps you identify those. And finally, flower characteristics. I'm not the best at this, but these are really good tools that you can use to help identify different plants strictly by their flower, okay? Anyways, I'm gonna wrap it up now because I really thought like this would be like, you know, typical first day, let's just, you know, go through the syllabus and then everybody can go get coffee. But, you know, frankly, I think a lot of us haven't seen humans for a long time. So it's nice to see everybody. Let me get into a different view here. I don't want to share. I'm going to blow this up. And there we go. Let's see. And I'm going to chat really quick if I can find it. Bear with me. There we go. I'm gonna open up chat really quick. And oh, and yes, I did have a couple students that they need to leave partway through. Totally fine. Somebody messaged me on the chat that says, hey, good to see you, but I've got to go. If you have to do that, go for it. Just like I explained in the syllabus thing, the knowledge is here, the recordings are here, you have the flexibility to watch this anytime you want, which again, I think is great. You can go on with your life and get this education piece to fit in on your schedule. So if you bail out, I'm not offended. If you want to put it in chat, that's encouraged, I appreciate it. Yeah, so that's it for today. I will be posting a quick plant walk during this week where I'll look at a couple different plants. I'm going to go really light on this, and you'll get the list and you'll get a quiz up that we won't do until next week. Okay, so we'll have a chance to in our meeting next week, this one, 8:30 to 11:35, we'll be able to go through that. We'll go through a quiz that will be very easy because it'll just be a couple plants. And then that'll be our routine. Our routine going on from here on out is gonna be this coming Monday, we'll have a very simple, easy quiz on a couple plants that I'll do videos of and post them so that you can watch them at your leisure. And then next week, we'll do a quick quiz during class. And then the rest of the class, we will go on a plant walk. And then the lectures that will be posted that are recorded will go more in depth onto that plant that you can watch at your leisure. And then the next Monday, oh, wait a second. Next Monday, we don't have class. That's funny. Okay. I'll find a different way to do that. I still will be posting this as a lab that you will have to look at next week. Next week is Labor Day, I think, right? So, but that'll be our normal routine. Mondays, or when you can watch it, we'll go through, we'll do a quiz, and then we will go on a plant walk. And then the next Monday, we will do our quiz and then go on a plant walk. So that quiz will be from the plants from the previous week. Okay, pretty simple, should be fun. I'm excited to go through plants with you guys. Please go through this plant characteristics diagram as well as this how to pronounce botanical names. I will post a couple really simple quizzes just to show that you did look at it. And then this week I will post a couple plants on a plant walk so you guys will get a good sense of what the rest of the semester will be like. Any questions, either unmute yourself and ask or throw them into chat. Otherwise, but great to see everybody. I've found that Zoom meetings can, be pretty cool. I did a lot of Zoom meetings or Zoom hangouts with my family over the summer, just so that grandparents could see their grandkids. And, this is the new way to connect. And it actually is weird, but it works out pretty well. I do look forward to being able to have real in-person classes. But again, I think that the great silver lining here is that you guys can do this at your leisure, fit it into your life, and progress pretty darn well. And any questions, concerns, let me know. Again, I hope that I emphasized it well enough that if you aren't amazing at memorizing things, then you can still do great in this class. You are responsible for your own knowledge in here, and you wouldn't be taking the class for any other reason. No questions. Have a wonderful week. I'll get the other pieces up by Wednesday. I have something going on. Anyways, I'll get them up this week for you guys to check out, and I'll post these. Laura, thank you. We do have class next week. This is wonderful. That's true. Thank you, Laura. So yeah, never mind that. I'll see you back here 8:30 on Monday morning, unless you choose to sleep in or go to work, or if the air quality is better, you want to take a walk or have you time. And then you would be required to watch the recording. I think that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Sorry to leave you with only 10 minutes of free time and free play after this. And hope to see everybody very soon. I'll post my office hours that I can do on Zoom either late today or sometime tomorrow. And then if there's other things that I've forgotten, please let me know. And if I don't respond to you, please let me know again. Don't feel offended by it at all. I am only as smart as I am, and I'm a little bit if things fall down in the inbox, I suck at it, let's be honest. Just bring it right back up and say, hey, take care of this. And that's a great way to do it. Yes, so thank you guys. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Oh, learning your limits, huh? Hey, I'm not done yet, guys. I just finished that way.